So hello everyone, welcome to our 13th in our series of ICSVE Zoom panel discussions featuring issues of terrorism and violent extremism. And we're excited again to have over 150 professionals signed up, some still signing in from the United States mainly, also from Europe, but we also have people coming from Tunisia, Indonesia, Hi Peta, South Korea, Norway, Philippines, Nigeria, Singapore, Serbia, and Estonia, and to just mention a few. And we welcome you all. We really always enjoy having this world gathering and so many different points of view. So it's good to see many friends and colleagues among you. Welcome. In our last event, we had Ryan Lowry, who has now joined ICSVE, and Ryan's here with us, and Daryl Davis, who will speak again today, although I haven't seen Daryl sign in yet, and Jesse Morton. And they discussed Ryan's personal journey out of and their work on white extremism, supremism. If you missed that event, and it was a quite moving event actually, if you missed that event or any of our 12 previous events, you can watch them on our ICSVE website. We always post the recordings and the chat from the events, and they're under ICSVE events, and we mail it out after the event as well. Likewise, you can view our 235 now short counter-narrative videos featuring ISIS and al-Shabaab insiders, as well as now we're adding a small group of former white supremacist members denouncing extremism on our ICSVE YouTube channel. And today you'll also see such a video of Jeff, that he was kind enough to give us an interview for that project. So we're posting the links to all of these in chat, so you'll be able to see them later, or if you're looking at multiple things at once, you can see them now. And today we're hosting a very interesting speaker, Jeff Shope, the former head of the National Socialist Party. And we're also welcoming back Daryl Davis, who helped to walk Jeff out of extremism, and Jesse Morton, who has himself left serving militant jihadism as a propagandist, and who is also working to rehabilitate many others leaving such groups, from white supremacism to militant jihadism. So we're looking very much forward to hearing from Jeff about his experiences inside the group and his journey back out of it and his work now. And we're also busy planning our events, and we really welcome suggestions from all of you. We've enjoyed hearing ideas, and some of them have been really good and about different speakers. You're all invited to join the chat, and you can put your comments and your questions in chat, and also we'll open it at the end of the session where you will be invited to voice your questions if we have time, which I hope we do. I've always warned people since I think about our third event, when we got some inappropriate comments in chat, that if you insult someone's religion, their ethnicity, or otherwise are out of line, we will boot you out of the event and you won't be welcome to future ones. So please remember, we're a diverse group of people with many different ideas, with many different experiences, and none of us are perfect. So try to listen respectfully, and especially, you know, Jeff's been through a long haul in his life. As our usual practice, we always capture the chat. We try to briefly answer any questions posed, and we mail it around afterwards along with the link to the video. I always like to thank our sponsors, past and present, the US State Department, the European Union, UN Women, Facebook, private donors, and the State of Qatar. And I always give a special call out to the State of Qatar because they supported our Breaking the ISIS Brand Counter-Narrative project, which now has 258 in-depth interviews of ISIS defectors, returnees, and prisoners. And from that, we have 235 short video clips. Those are made by Zach Badorf, who couldn't be here with us today, Sheikh Ali, and myself working in concert. We're always inviting people, and Vladimir, I know I have to get back to you on this. Anybody that would be willing to translate, we're really grateful to people that are willing to translate. We're also grateful to Facebook that helps us to put these out on campaigns. So Ryan's video and Jeff's video are slated probably for February to go out on campaigns in the US, possibly in Germany and other countries, we'll see, Canada, where white supremacism is an issue. So I'm going to briefly introduce our speakers. They all have long and, hello Fagan. Hello, Fagan. Probably not hearing me yet, but all of our speakers have long bios, and I'm not going to read their bios. You've all received them. But to introduce Jeff, he entered the largest neo-Nazi organization in the United States, the National Socialist Movement, as a young man in 1994. He's still young. And within 2 years, rose to become its leader for the next 25 years. So Jeff has quite a lot of experience. After a series of events, which includes meeting Daryl Davis, that shook his confidence in what he had devoted a great portion of his life to, Jeff left the group in 2019. So he'll speak today about his attraction to the group, his rise to a position of power, and his experiences inside of it. But probably most importantly, he'll speak about the real and continuing challenges of exiting a hate group when you've built your whole life around it, including your livelihood. And he'll speak to the processes of both disengagement and de-radicalization. Daryl Davis, I hope, has joined us. Daryl is an amazingly courageous man. He's Black, and he has set up various meetings to surprise members of the KKK and personally confronted white supremacists. Daryl is one of the reasons that Jeff Shope left the NSM, but I'm going to let Daryl and Jeff tell that story. Jesse Morton is also going to speak. He's our ICSVE senior researcher and practitioner. He was once a jihadist propagandist when he was known as Yunus Abdullah Muhammad, and he ran Revolution Muslim, a New York City-based organization active in the 2000s, and which was connected to a number of terrorism cases. Jesse has been working with people that want to leave white supremacism and people that want to leave groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And he's skilled at this, and he's also been working with Ryan on this. And he'll speak a little bit about his own struggles and also understanding the process of de-radicalization and disengagement. So Molly, if you would play Jeff's video, we'll start with that, and then we'll move to letting all the speakers speak, and then we'll let everyone else speak.
I was skipping school. All of my grades went down from A's and B's down to like D minuses and fails. I was just a bit out of control, not listening to my parents, not following the rules, taking my car out wherever I wanted to go. I snuck a bottle of whiskey and, you know, I had some beers. I got kicked out of school for skipping all those days, and I got kicked out of my house. I got Mein Kampf at 16. A little bit later, I started learning a little bit more about the ideology. I was reading as much as I could on the movement and trying to learn about it. The National Socialist movement was one. I would tell people, like, I'm a National Socialist first, skinhead is secondary. When I first got involved, I, like a lot of people when they get involved in extremism, they want to tell everybody, they want to spread the word and recruit everybody. So I'm thinking I'm going to recruit my parents. This is the truth. I was completely an ideologue of this cause. So here I'm finding so-called facts, the Holocaust revisionism. My involvement in the movement cost my family dearly. I was highly active. I rose up through the ranks pretty fast. I became a local group leader, and within a couple of years of joining, I was the national leader of the organization and turned it into the largest organization of its kind in the entire country. The mission of the NSM was basically to have like a white homeland. There was a lot of fantasies about race war. If there was a race war, that we would just massacre people. I really, truly believed in it and thought that I was going to save my country, save my race. I believed that I was a patriot and this was a noble thing. There is hate there. There's a ton of hate there. And it's developed and it's fostered there. Like, you could be having dinner and somebody could spill a glass of water and, oh, that's the Jews. The Jews were behind everything. I didn't know any Jews. Like, I just automatically assumed that they were all evil and I would not have anything to do with any of them. I looked and dressed like a skinhead, so I'm wearing the flight jacket with swastika patches. The average Black person or Hispanic is not going to come up and be like, hey, how's it going? And he basically said, Jeff, this road that you're on is going to lead one of two places. They're either going to lock you up or they're going to kill you. And I've had assassination attempts. I got scars across the back of my head from one of them. Antifa, they took a tire iron and split the back of my skull open. We're here to kill you, motherfucker. They infiltrated the group at the time. These two guys, one of them was over at the house as a dinner guest, and he was plotting to kill me. Daryl was telling me a story about when he was a boy. He was in the Boy Scout. He was in this parade, and people were throwing rocks at him. He didn't understand that at the time. It really bothered me that racism in general could inspire someone to do something like that. Having this human connection, having Daryl explain to me how this affected him as a child, stuck with me. She went in to explain how, as a child, that she felt less than a person. The movement, the ideology that I believed in caused her to feel like less than a person. I can literally feel her pain. I can see it in her face. Here I'm seeing this incredible woman sitting across from me, deeply hurt. It made me feel like absolute crap inside. You know, I felt like I got kicked in the chest by a horse. It tapped into the vulnerabilities inside of myself, that humanity. All of a sudden, it's very real. Looking back on it now, it's like, what the heck were you thinking? I wish I wouldn't have got into it at all, but I mean, you can't change the past. You can only try to fix or repair the damage that's done, and that's what I'm doing now. I saw it rip apart my family. I've seen people go to prison for 40 years. I've seen people die. When you're involved in extremism of any sort, you don't see yourself as an extremist. You just see yourself as doing something noble or right. There's nothing really, truly positive that comes out of being involved in this stuff. The garbage that I was spewing for all those years, an incredible amount of damage. It's okay to be proud of your heritage and all that sort of thing. Nobody's saying that that's wrong. Holding someone else down or belittling someone else or trying to take something away from them, that's when you've crossed the line. It's not noble anymore. Now what you're doing is you're being the oppressor.
So you can see Jeff's a very articulate person, and we look forward to hearing from him in a few minutes. I want to thank Zach Bador for making that film. I think he did a good job, and Jeff gave us use of a lot of film that he had in his archives to make it. So Jeff, the floor is yours, and we look forward to hearing from you about your experiences, and particularly how hard it was to come out and how you've managed to do it.
Thank you, Ann. I'm really honored and appreciate the platform here today to discuss this with everybody. So my story is I was involved in the National Socialist Movement for 27 years. 25 of those years, I was at the helm of the organization. I built the organization into the largest organization of its kind in the country. In the United States. For those that don't know what the National Socialist Movement is, basically it is a continuation of George Lincoln Rockwell's American Nazi Party. It was founded by men that had served with George Lincoln Rockwell, and that's the organization that I sought out, that I was looking to join ever since I can remember as a young man, growing up. And we talk a little bit about driving factors and what led a person. Everyone has different reasons why they join an organization like this. For me, my grandfather fought in the Third Reich, and my great uncles did as well. So I knew this as a very young man. I mean, going back to like about the 4th grade, I was fascinated with that. And I have to preface that by saying my family was absolutely not in support of me being involved in National Socialism. They didn't encourage this. In fact, they were very much against it. And as that fascination grew as a young man, I went on to eventually join the organization and get involved. And everybody has their reasons, you know, and a lot of people will join an organization for a sense of belonging. the family type environment, or the perceived family environment, I should say. A sense of belonging. Sometimes it's trauma that drives people into these things, or bad experiences. For me, it was that fascination with the historical and family connection from the get-go. I want to say that I was absolutely a true believer in this cause. I was literally a fanatic, a fanatical National Socialist that was willing to sacrifice anything and everything for the cause. And when I say that, I mean, you literally are so involved in this sort of thing that all the negative things that are happening to you at the time, all the sacrifices, all the terrible things that are happening, a lot of times when you get involved in something like this, it's very cult-like. And I know that that was something that, as I was in the process of dating and things like that, literally every girl that I was dating that had come to a meeting or that had come to an event would say one after the other, Jeff, this is like a cult. This is like a cult, what you're involved in. You're the cult leader. And it would make me really angry at the time. I said, man, what is wrong with all these girls? Each and every one of them, almost one after the other, that were not involved in it, were saying this type of thing when they were coming around and seeing how the organization operated. I'm thinking there's something wrong with every girl I'm dating, when in reality there was something wrong with me that I just couldn't see it. And that's telling. It's very telling about how the mentality of these organizations works. When you're involved in it, you don't see that. You don't realize that you're there in an echo chamber. You're in a bubble. You've erected these barriers in your mind, and you've put them there. You've put them up, but you can't see beyond them. You're stuck. You're behind these mental barriers. You can't see beyond it. You're not able to see the humanity of the so-called other. You're not able to understand that. It's like it's blocked out because you're in this echo chamber. Your social and support network, everyone that you know is quite often involved in the organization. A lot of people, I was very fortunate in that sense, where my family didn't completely disown me, so I still had family ties. But a lot of other people they'll either cut their family off, or their family will cut them off. And that just feeds into that mentality, or that cult-like bubble that you're already stuck in. Because everything that you're hearing, if you have any doubts, if you have any questions, anything like that, of course the people in the group are going to back up what you're saying, or back up any type of concerns, to keep you there, to keep you grounded there, to keep you there. I think a lot of times when we talk about extremism and why people get involved in these type of things, there's a lot of misunderstandings about the factors that drive people there, and also why they stay there. A lot of times when you hear people talking about the movement, people that have left, they'll say things like, well, that they were all filled with hate, that they joined the movement because they were filled with hate. And I want to preface by saying that the movement is definitely a hateful place. The hate is fostered and developed there. But I would not say that for the as a leader of the organization for 25 years, I wanted to know, with the people that were joining, why did you join? What was it that got you, that brought you to us? Because we were always on the lookout in the organization for informants, infiltrators, people that just weren't totally dedicated to the group, because we were looking at people to groom, so to speak, for leadership positions and things like that. So we always wanted to know what brought them there. And it was almost, I would say rare, but it was very, very few that would say, well, I hate this person, I hate that person, or that group of people, and that's why I joined. That's not accurate. That is not, I mean, if someone joined and specifically said that they joined out of hate and things like that, the first thing that popped into my head at the time was, this could be somebody that's dangerous. This could be somebody that's going to go out and do something illegal, something that's going to get the organization in trouble. They might have some psychological issues, sociopaths, psychopaths, if they're driven by this. Because the vast majority of the people that are joining these type of things, and this is really incredibly important when we're looking at trying to de-radicalize people, when we're looking at trying to help people exit, is to really understand what's bringing them there. And that's why I'm explaining this. But I believe myself in my own trajectory, that we were doing something honorable, that we were doing something noble, that we were going to save our people, we were going to save our country, that it was a good thing. And that's something I think a lot of people miss when they're trying to understand this type of ideology. And it's not just National Socialism. This same concept could be placed into any kind of extremism, whether it's left wing, right wing, whether it's religious extremism, is that all of us that were involved in these different things, or even the cult member, when you're looking into the psychological aspects of these things, those are the driving factors. Is that a lot of times, most of the people think that they're doing something good. If you didn't think you were doing something good, you wouldn't stay there 25, 27 years. You wouldn't stay there for a year if you were just motivated by things other than that. So I think it's incredibly important that we understand these driving factors and why people are going to these type of organizations. And that's really important in the disengagement and de-radicalization process too, is to understand those type of things, those driving factors that bring people into these type of organizations. Because if you don't understand that, and if you don't approach people based on those principles, you're not going to get through to them. You're not going to get through to them by arguing that they're wrong or that this or that is wrong. They have to be able to see the humanity of the others. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. When I talk about being willing to sacrifice everything for the cause, just like it said in the video, is, I had seen people in the organization, people that I was close to. One of my best friends was shot in the head. That's just one. I mean, there was an incredible number of people that either killed themselves, were killed in shootouts, were murdered. Seeing friends die, seeing friends go to prison. I was with another friend in Chicago that was arrested and taken by the marshals, U.S. Marshals, and is doing 40 years. That's just one. I could go on and on and on and talk about all of the people that either lost their lives or went to prison. And looking at that outlook at the time, thinking about it now is after being out, is like processing a whole new set of things is just incredible. But when you're there during that time, like when we were losing people, friends were dying or going to prison and things like that, I saw that as sacrifices for the cause. Like, well, that person was a martyr, that person was, this is just what we do, this is how it is. And that's not a normal way to look at things. That's not a normal trajectory. That's not normal at all. It's just simply not. Another associate of mine, a friend of mine, had said to me, he's been out about a year longer than I have out of the movement. And he says, I was thinking about the church down the street from my house. And he goes, how many people in that church, in that congregation, do you think know somebody that killed somebody else? I said, I don't know. It's a strange question. And he said, think about it. How many people in the church know somebody or has somebody that they're close to that may have killed somebody? And I said, probably nobody. Maybe one person. Probably nobody, though. Probably nobody in your country church knows somebody. And he goes, how many people do we know? And I tell you, I was like, too many. And when you put things like that into perspective, it hits you like a ton of bricks. It's absolutely incredible. And when you talk about being in this bubble, this echo chamber, or behind the barriers, you really do not see beyond that. And that's why we need to get people beyond those barriers. We need to get through to them and speak in the language that they understand, in a way that they understand. And I think as it said in the video, and as Ann mentioned as well, my livelihood, my work, everything was involved in this organization. When I walked away, it's been almost 2 years now, but when I walked away 2 years ago, I gave up my business, my livelihood, everything else. And these were some of the things I was struggling with upon before I left. I thought, well, who is going to hire me? Who is going to put me to work? These are some of the more selfish or self issues that I was struggling with as I was leaving. I stopped talking to most of the people that I knew, because at first when I left, I retired from the organization. I said, that I was leaving. I knew I was going to be speaking out, but I wasn't ready immediately. When I was ready to speak, my friend Jesse Morton, who's on the show today, or the program today, helped me with, getting out there and starting to speak, as well as the Simon Wiesenthal Center, a good friend there, Rick Eaton, Daryl Davis, who you'll hear from today as well. But when we talk about, so everyone's trajectory on leaving is a little bit different. For me, as somebody that was the poster boy for National Socialism or Nazism in the United States, it was quite a bit different. Everyone's struggle is difficult coming out, especially if you've been a public figure there in the movement, because that's what you're known for. So I'm struggling in my mind with, is this the way the public is always going to see me? Are they always going to see me as that Nazi, as that guy that ran the NSM? Are they always going to see that? And struggling with it and going, well, should I stay a little bit longer? Should I, stay there a little longer and keep running my record business that was was selling paraphernalia and white nationalist music and things like that. Is coming up with all these excuses. I should have left the organization 2-3 years ago, 2-3 years before I left, because then I was already having doubts. And I'm going to get to that right now. Meeting people and being able to see the humanity in others is what really got to me, is what really got through to me. And you'll hear a little bit from Daryl Davis in a minute, but Daryl, when I met Daryl, he was I believe Daryl was the first person that truly planted that seed. I'm meeting Daryl Davis because I was going to be part of a film that he was in. And I thought, well, this is a great opportunity for the NSM. I'm going to, we knew it wasn't going to be pro NSM or anything like that, but it was an opportunity. We always used the media as we could to get out there and speak and things like that. So I thought, well, okay, I'll meet with this guy. I didn't know who he was before that, which is odd, because normally I would want to know everything about any filming that I'm going to, but for whatever reason at this particular time, I didn't look up anything. So I didn't do any background on it or anything. I just went and met with him, and I met an incredible human being. I met somebody that planted a seed that got through to me, with him showing his vulnerability and talking to me about his own personal experience, and what got him on this quest to understand racism and hate was how he was victimized as a child. And here I'm thinking, I'm doing this noble thing. I'm going to stand up for my people, my race, my country, and do something good and noble. And that's why I joined the movement. And to see what that ideology did to a young man and how it affected this man sitting across from me, that was the first major seed I feel that was planted in me, where I started questioning everything that I was doing. I still kept doing it. So I was going through the de-radicalization process backwards, basically. You should disengage first, as many of you know probably that are listening. It's always better to disengage first and then de-radicalize. In my case, it was backwards. I was already de-radicalizing while I was still in the organization, and that reflected on a lot of things that I was doing in the organization. After meeting Daryl about a year later, I met another filmmaker, same scenario. We had done all kinds of press, and most of it was uneventful. It was the same. But meeting Daryl, he planted that first seed. Then I met a Muslim filmmaker by the name of Dia Khan, and Dia did something very similar to what Daryl did by explaining her story, by explaining what put her on this quest to figure out hate and racism and all these sorts of things. And she's sitting across from me in this chair, and I had spent weeks with her filming, during the process of this film. So I got to know her pretty well, and we became friends, you know. And the ongoing joke between us was, hey, we're not supposed to be friends, but but we are, but we're not supposed to be. And by the end of the filmmaking, you know, because the joke was she was my bratty little sister, so I was the protective big brother. So it was like, but we're not supposed to be friends. We're not supposed to be hugging, all these sorts of things. But she really got through to me. And when she told me about how hate and racism affected her as a young woman, or as a child, as a child and growing up, it hit me. I could see the pain. I could feel the pain in her face. When you talk about energies or things like that, I don't want to get too philosophical here, but I could feel it. I could see the pain in her face, and that hit me like a ton of bricks in the chest, or like being kicked by a horse. It really got through to me. And that, for meeting Dia, was the end of my time in the movement. I was still there, about another year. But as I was struggling through that, leaving, I was talking with her, and I was sharing with her all of the different things that I was struggling with upon leaving the organization. So I think that's about the gist of my story on that. When you leave, you're processing. When you see these things, when you start seeing the humanity of others, and you're getting beyond the barriers mentally, there's so many emotions. That first period of time when you're leaving the organization, you have shame, you have guilt, you have you're carrying this weight, and this weight is bearing down on you, and holding you down mentally, emotionally. It's a really incredibly difficult process, and you're trying to start your life over. For some people, that process takes years and years and years. And I know any of us that have left, we're always learning, constantly learning new things every single day. But I'm incredibly thankful for the incredible people like, there was many others too, but incredible people like Daryl and Dia especially, that helped me to be able to see their humanity, which got me to reflect on my life, the choices I was making, and eventually get back out. And I don't regret it for a second. And I have this sense of responsibility I could be doing anything else other than speaking out. I know business. I ran a successful business before, but I feel like it's my duty. It's my inherent duty to do something positive with the past, with the negativity of the past, and the garbage and the hate and the terrible stuff that I spewed out for so many years. Doing the work that I do now and helping people to leave these organizations, helping people to disengage and de-radicalize. This is my way of giving back. It's when life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. This is I was a skillful recruiter and propagandist in my past. It's not something that I'm proud of. I'm deeply ashamed about it. It would be so much easier to just simply go off into the business world. But I have a responsibility to right the wrongs of the past the best I can. And that's why I do the work I do today. Hopefully I didn't go too long there, Ann.
No, that's fine. And thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much. And I think it's a painful thing to talk about, because like you were saying, there is so much shame, but you're trying to make good out of it now. And I hope you do. I hope you do. And I'm happy that you are pulling others out. I think in the interest of time, we'll move right to Daryl. Thank you, Daryl, for joining us. And I wonder if you'd like to tell the story of meeting Jeff and getting through to him, because for me, that's such a positive thing, that even the people that could be victims of such movements can change the entire thing. I mean, that you helped Jeff, the leader of the NSM, to walk away from it. That's amazing. So Daryl, would you like to take the floor, please?
Thank you, Ann, very much. And I'm sorry, I missed half of Jeff's monologue here. I just got off another call myself and just joined in here for a moment. But yes, I'm happy to tell the story of meeting Jeff. This was back in 2016, and I already knew who Jeff was. I'd known who he was for a while. And just to give you a little bit of background, I've been doing this kind of work for about 37 years. And it started with a racist experience that I had at the age of 10. And then later on at the age of 15 in 1974, we had a class in my high school. I was a sophomore, it was a senior class, but I was taking it as a sophomore at age 15, called the POTC, which stood for Problems of the 20th Century. And our teacher would invite in these controversial speakers to the classroom to address the seniors and on any various topics. So one day he had the head of the American Nazi Party come to our school. Now understand, this is 1974. You could never get away with that today. But I was glad that this guy came. The American Nazi Party was founded by a fellow named George Lincoln Rockwell, who was a major proponent of the ideology of Adolf Hitler. And he was always getting into it with Martin Luther King. And then the American Nazi Party was founded about 30 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, in a town called Arlington, Virginia, right across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. And his right-hand guy was a guy named Matt Cole, Koehl. Well, Lincoln Rockwell was murdered by one of his own members, a guy named John Poulter, and then Matt Cole took over the organization. So on this day in 1974, Matt Cole came to my school, and he stood at the front of my classroom espousing all these views of white supremacy. And he pointed at me and one of the other Black kids in the class and said, "We're going to ship you back to Africa." And then he made a sweeping motion with his finger like that and said, "And all you Jews out there, you're going back to Israel." Now, I was 15 and I was just sitting there looking at this guy in total amazement. I mean, I wasn't frightened, but I was like, where is this guy coming from? I'd never heard an adult talk like that before. And what gives him the right to tell me where I'm going? So I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, and somebody in my class said, "What happens if they don't want to go?" And Matt Cole said, "Oh, they have no choice. If they do not leave voluntarily, they will be exterminated in the upcoming race war." That was the first time I ever heard the term race war. And I had no idea what this guy was talking about. And then he went on to say something to the effect of, your skin, the color of your skin will be your uniform. And that propelled me to buy books on the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, the Ku Klux Klan, anybody who had Black supremacy, white supremacy, anti-Semitism, racism, because there were no courses you could take on it. So I had to self-educate. And to this day, I have a vast, library on that stuff. So I've always kept up with it. And later on, after I graduated college, I confronted Matt Cole 8 years later and in person and talked to him. And so I've always followed that kind of thing. So we were filming a movie, a documentary in 2016, and the NSM, I'd followed Jeff's activities for a while. I didn't know him personally, but I knew who he was and seen footage of him. And the producers of the movie had invited him to come and have a conversation with me. So I knew I was going to meet with him, and they had put me in a hotel room in Montgomery, Alabama. We'd been down there along the Civil Rights Trail filming some of that stuff and all that kind of thing. So Jeff was in Detroit, and they invited him to come down to Montgomery, and they wanted me to remain in the hotel and then come to this little hot dog hamburger grill called Chris's Grill, something like that, which was legendary because Hank Williams, Sr., the father of country music, had written "Hey, hey, good looking," sitting there at the counter. And anyway, so they were going to get everything set up. Jeff was already going to be in there seated, and they were going to have all the cameras set, and then they were going to call me. They had me a rental car. I was going to drive over from the hotel and walk in and sit down and get into it with Jeff. So when they gave me the call, everything was set. I drove over there, and as I'm pulling up, I see somebody who looks like Jeff sitting on this bench outside of the grill, sitting there with a friend of his, and or somebody who I assume was a friend, and there's only two people. And I said, that looks like the guy. And I thought he was going to be inside. So anyway, I got out and I walked over to him and I said, Jeff Scoop? And he said, yeah. I said, I'm Daryl Davis. And I put my hand out. He shook my hand. I shook his friend's hand. And we sat there, he was sitting, I was standing, for a few minutes, just, chit-chatting, talking. And he was very friendly, very cordial, as was I. And we walked in together, much to the surprise of the director and producer, because that was not their plan. And that, I think, for them, that threw everything off. But for me, it was great because I got to know him, and in retrospect, I feel that they may have been trying to stage something, so there'd be some kind of, hostility, that they could film or something like that. But anyway, he was, we walked in together and they were surprised, and we sat down and we started talking. I asked him, how he got into it and what he believed, etc. And I told him my story, and he asked me some questions, and everything was very cordial. Professionally, I'm a musician, and he likes music. Obviously, he ran a record business, and I asked him if he liked rock music. Oh yeah, And I said, well, who's the king of rock and roll? And he said, well, Elvis, of course. I said, no, Elvis did not invent rock and roll. I said, I am a huge Elvis Presley fan. I saw Elvis 14 times. I met him twice, and I went to his funeral. I said, but the man that I played piano for 32 years invented rock and roll. Without him, there wouldn't be an Elvis Presley. There wouldn't be the Beatles, the Stones, Led Zeppelin, or anybody who played rock. The man who invented rock and roll is Chuck Berry. And so he says, well, what difference does it make? Who invented it? If it's music, it's good, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, what difference does it make whether somebody, is black or white or Jewish or something like that? So that kind of, broke the ice, and it gave him pause. And we had some laughs. And he said, he was trying to be a patriot, for his country and bring things together. And I said, oh, so like Martin Luther King? And he said, well, yes and no. And I said, well, can I join the NSM? He said, well, no. I said, well, you can join Martin Luther King's organization. So there's a difference there. And so, we, like I said, it was a lot of humor there, but I saw him as somebody who was a human being, and he was treating me as a human being. And in those few moments, we got very, very close. We were, talking for maybe, 30, 40 minutes. They only show, a few minutes in the movie, but we got very close. And then all of a sudden he snapped back into NSM mode for a second, because it was almost as though he thought he got a little too close and he had to get his NSM stuff out. So then he starts talking about, I will fight to the last bullet for my people, and on and on. And then after it was over, we exchanged phone numbers and things like that. And then a couple of years later, I heard that he had left the movement. I thought, oh, this is very interesting, because I felt this guy, really, at this point, he was not the person that I had seen in footage before. Something had changed. I didn't know him before, but something didn't add up with the perspective that I had from seeing him in footage. He was a lot more genteel, a lot more open, a lot more understanding. So something had shifted. I wasn't sure what, because I didn't know him from before. And but then when I heard that he had quit, there were things. Some people said he quit. Some people said he got booted out. Whatever. The good thing is he's not associated with them. That's the main thing. And I said, I need to give that guy a call. I hope he still has the same phone number, because I had it in my phone where he gave it to me. And I called him, and he answered the phone, and we talked, and it was like, we were back to where we were in that bar, just having a good old conversation like we had outside when we walked in together. So, I felt that I had shaken hands with a stranger, but, upon entering, but shook hands with a friend upon parting, upon leaving. And we reconnected very well then. And since that time, I lecture all over the country, and I've had some lectures where people have hired me, and I've said, hey, listen, why don't I invite my friend Jeff Scoop? He was the head of the NSM for 25 years. He can offer other perspectives, you know, that I don't have privy to because he was on the inside. And so he's come out and spoken on stages with me at NYU and some places in Rhode Island and other things. So I'm very happy that he's out. I'm very happy that he's doing this program because Jeff has a wealth of knowledge. You know, people don't usually last as long as he did in a leadership role in some of these things. As I said, I've been doing this for 37 years, mostly with the Klan. And I see Klan leaders, Grand Dragons, Imperial Wizards, you know, they're around for a few years. Some last a little longer, or maybe a little over 10 years. But 25 years, that's a long time. And something about him has enabled him to recruit people and have them uphold him in that position for that long. Because in hate organizations, and you know, there's a lot of infighting because hurt people. And that even goes in within the organization. People are trying to tear you down, bring you down for whatever reason. Not just bring people down on the outside, but also on the inside. And there are many various reasons as to why people join these things. Sometimes it is hate, sometimes it's dysfunction in the family, other times there's a perfectly normal family, but somebody feels that something is going wrong with the country and, you know, and I know how to repair it and that kind of thing. You know, it's my patriotic duty. Well, I consider myself a patriot. It's my patriotic duty to try to fix my country and the problems that are in my country and what I can do to contribute. So that's why I do the work that I do, and which is why Jeff is doing the work that he is doing now. And so he has switched his definition of patriotism to including everybody than just separating people now. And I'm very, very happy to be working with him and sharing this platform with him.
Thank you, Daryl.
Thank you, Ann.
We're going to open it for question and answers, but we'd like to hear from Jesse Morton, who also left a group and struggled over some years over really being totally out, and has talked with many people that are on their way out of groups, including Jeff. So Jesse, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ann. I'll try to be as brief as possible. I think it's a lot of what is mentioned in Jeff's personal narrative and Daryl's narrative of how planting a seed is very important, and not looking at de-radicalization as an event, but as a process is key. In the literature on intervention work or countering violent extremism, we distinguish between disengagement, which is behavioral and associated with leaving a movement, and de-radicalization, which is a complete cognitive alteration and a principle, an adjustment of principles through which one sees the world. And I think that my case is interesting because I'm a former jihadist that was connected to an organization, in fact, ran an organization that allied itself with many of the charismatic preachers on the jihadist side that would represent the role that Jeff played in his own movement. And in 2011, after threatening the writers of South Park and my organization being connected to more than 10 at that time terrorist plots, I moved to Morocco to flee possible criminal prosecution and live there in the midst of a context that was the Arab Spring. And that started a process of change because I was able to leave the movement physically. I could not maintain correspondence with a lot of my allies and my associates, so I had less time spent with a network and new opportunities to engage with newer networks, particularly Arab millennial youth, who were very adamant about democracy and wanted nothing to do with the totalitarian, top-down, utopic Islamic state that I was advocating for. And that's an important distinction because what we know about individual processes and behavior, particularly when it comes to people that are suffering from extremism and where extremism comes from, is that it's not just about the individual, but it is also about the group and the belonging and the camaraderie. So when Jeff says that he felt like he was doing something positive, it is true. Inside of extremist movements, the idea is that you are not the people that the society is portraying you as. You're not evil because inside of that collective, oftentimes you're finding the only community and camaraderie you've ever known in your life. I started my process of disengagement in 2011, but I ultimately had to pay consequence for what I had done as a radicalizer and a recruiter on the jihadist spectrum. And I was returned to the United States, extradited from Morocco to the US to face criminal prosecution for terrorism-related offenses, was incarcerated in solitary confinement and had more time to reflect, spent a long time during my period of incarceration adjusting, was released in March of 2015, and wanted to dedicate my life, sort of like Jeff, to sort of repairing some of the wrongs that I had done. The process of disengagement was one thing. The process of de-radicalization, I thought I had simply left the ideology, so that was sufficient. And in fact, what would come to haunt me was not recognizing that the underlying traumas, the child abuse, being running away. Jeff talked in the video about, leaving home early, running away, living on the streets, developing a street mentality, gravitating to Islam for stability and community, but then gravitating towards extremist Islam because of those underlying issues that I had never had an opportunity to rectify under conditions of safety and security, manifested themselves in susceptibility for radicalization. But ultimately, what became of my adverse experiences in life and my trauma was addiction. That extremism fulfilled and gave that stability too. And the problem with that was that when I removed the ideological affinity and affiliation, essentially what it did was it tapped back into root complexes and root traumas. And I decided upon going public as America's first former jihadist, and within a very short period of time, relapsed on drugs and alcohol for the first time in 14 years. And since that time, I have rebuilt and reestablished myself. I run an organization, and now I've merged that organization with Ann and ICSVE, and we're honored to be doing this work together. And about 2.5 years ago, I started to really look at how we could empirically assess understanding the distinctions between disengagement and de-radicalization and the processes and pathways associated with that through the lens of addiction. For while I was a radicalizer and a recruiter, I also was a substance abuse counselor that ran an outpatient substance abuse mental health clinic in Brooklyn, New York, and never thought that the skill set that I had developed and the understanding that I had developed in that line of work would actually be applicable to a future life of combating violent extremism. Just to say, after my relapse and what we're learning from doing this is, as I started to develop a better understanding of addiction to ideology as addiction to substances and where addiction comes from, and started to heal myself, the primary concern threat with domestic extremism began more and more to be the conversations around far right-wing extremism. And so what I started to do was to start with a hypothesis. Would far right-wing extremists talk to me? Would they communicate with me because I was a jihadist and I understood some of extremism, but because I didn't and wasn't perceived as someone who came from their milieu, which could automatically brand you a heretic or an apostate and make it so that people won't break through to you and communicate with you. And since that time, apart from the work that we've done on jihadism, we have developed this sort of ecosystemic holistic approach that has put me in contact with probably 150 to 200 not successful disengagement de-radicalization cases, but 150 to 200 intimate engagements with people that were current members of far right-wing extremist movements or that had recently disengaged. And Jeff is one of them. Jeff was in a position where when I met Jeff, he was about to have his case and his story released in the national audience on an MSNBC documentary. But that MSNBC documentary was cut in a way that was, I think, attempting to brandish Jeff as someone that could not be an asset going forward. And I think that we have to have compassion and forgiveness, and that we have to understand that disengagement and one-on-one interventions are not sufficient, that it is all about putting a new cast of characters and developing social bonds. This is what we know from the literature, but we haven't yet recognized in the literature. When we look at adverse childhood experiences and trauma, we don't say that every extremist is traumatized, but we do know that white supremacists have 65% of them by the age of 18 experienced 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. That adverse childhood experiences are not just connected to addiction later in life, criminal behavior, sexual offenses, and all kinds of characteristics from ACE studies, we also are starting to see indications that they are connected to radicalization into violent extremism. And so with regard to how do we deal with transitioning trauma into a healthy post-traumatic growth instead of post-traumatic stress disorder direction, we know that it has nothing to do with meeting mentors or one-on-one intervention. It has to do with social bonds and social connection. And so what we do is we essentially take an individual, work with them one-on-one, and try to create opportunities where they can experience the same sort of significance, camaraderie, meaning, and purpose that they got while they were in the group, and that they can reorient and heal through the process of social engagement and social interaction. And we helped Jeff go public. We helped give him a platform on which he could say that he had left the National Socialist movement. And we could see from society's reaction to that how difficult it is to understand what we have to do as a society to get above and beyond far right-wing extremism. The scientist Albert Einstein once said that you cannot combat a problem at the same level of consciousness that created it. And I think that Daryl's narrative is very representative of a story that is running coincident to that principle. When we went public with Jeff at New America, we took him to Turkey first to let him speak in a symposium that was non-American based because we knew there would be pushback. And then we took him to a New America panel discussion. And since that time, to this day, so many people talk about Jeff as if he is feigning, talk about Jeff without any support. Even people in the field of countering violent extremism and some of the organizations that are dedicated, at least ostensibly, to talking about compassion, to talking about forgiveness, because they cannot utilize Jeff in a way that would perhaps profit or something like this, continue to push back against his efforts. And I think that's a long conversation that can be held inside of itself. But I think that Jeff's story is one that's representative of the differentiation between understanding disengagement, distinguishing between disengagement and de-radicalization, and understanding that de-radicalization is a process, it's not an event, and that it is contingent largely upon being put in a new social network. And so with my case, the work that I do every day is not unlike a substance abuse counselor. When you look at the data on substance abuse counselors, they tend to have better outcomes with regard to their own intervention work and with regard to their ability to stay in the field longer, because when they do the work, they have more skin in the game, and they report that it plays a role in their own recovery. And so, long story short, we'll end there. But when we think about interventions, I think what we're building out is what I like to call a trauma encountering violent extremism informed approach. I think that what we're learning about trauma-informed care and what we're learning about interventions related to trauma in the realm of family, in the realm of criminal recidivism reduction, in the realm of substance abuse, in the realm of mental health, is really key, because what we started to do with regard to studying radicalization trajectories is we typically, and this is where what made me really intimately interested in working with Anne, a lot of times we look at life trajectories and we start with, when did you first contact extremist literature? When did you first know about extremism? And in fact, what we should be looking at is an entire life trajectory, an entire life history that starts with early childhood and adolescence. And when we start to do that in surveying data, we're going to see some insights that are directly related to some of the underlying traumas that Jeff described, that I see every day when I talk to extremists and when I do the intervention work that we do. And so I think that Jeff's story is very valuable, and I concur with Daryl that he's a wealth of knowledge. I have learned so much from Jeff in talking to him about right-wing extremism, and it's an honor to be able to support him and to watch him as he plays a role in becoming an asset going forward. And I think it's voices like Jeff's that can let us understand, as we watch him grow and more people realize that his departure is sincere, and that we can, in fact, see people change and depart from movements and become assets and reorient their radicalization in a positive direction. I think he's a case study with enormous potential to give benefit going forward, not just to helping us understand the movement, but to learning how to better conduct interventions and how to do the realm of preventing and countering violent extremist practice better. So thank you for allowing me to share, and that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. That's great. So it's been such great talks from all three of you, and there's 10 zillion questions in the chat. I'd like to ask Rod Dubrow Marshall to speak. He said that he was in left-wing extremism, and he's talking about the fusion identity fusion that happens. And this is something that Scott Atran has looked at quite a bit with jihadists, of when you get totally fused with the group, what happens? So Rod, if you'd like to make your comment and ask your question. I think you have a question for Jeff.
Sure. Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Jeff, Daryl, Jesse. And yeah, I was a member of 2 far-left extremist groups, and I completely empathize with what you were saying there, Jeff, about the totalistic nature of the identity and how it felt at the time that you were doing absolutely the right thing, even though to everybody else it didn't look like that, but it felt like you were doing something really righteous and good for the world. And in that sense, I've always seen violent extremist groups as forms of cults that to that extent indoctrinate you. And I just wanted to get your take really on how it felt at the time that it meant everything, and that the world, everything in the world you look at through that frame of reference, and that you're not doing it because the group is making you do it. You actually feel like you're doing it voluntarily. So even though we talk about milieu control and coercive control, the way that groups control people is by converting their identity to that of the group, because you feel at the time as if you're doing it yourself and doing it for yourself. So leaving is like leaving yourself and leaving yourself behind. That's how I felt. So I was just interested in your take on that, because I think we need to develop better measures. I've been working on measures of extent of identity based on self-categorization theory and social psychology for many years, but I think we need to develop new and better ways of measuring that with former members and indeed with current members of violent extremist groups. So those were just my comments and my question there. Thank you.
Jeff, did you want to reply to that?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Rod. And he's absolutely right. I mean, when you're involved in this stuff, you truly believe that you're there for a reason. And, you know, Rod gave a perfect example there, that extremism, it crosses over, you know, whether it's right, whether it's left, whether it's religious extremism, these cross over and are very similar. From the outside looking in, if you had asked me when I was involved in the extremist organization, I would have said, no, there's nothing in common between, you know, these different types of extremism. But once you process these things and you're studying them and you're understanding the human psychology of it and the driving factors and the factorization, he's absolutely right. And that's the biggest thing is when you're looking at the people that are involved in this, and even when you're looking at counter messaging programs and things like that, you have to understand that the people that are there don't think they're doing something bad. They don't see it as like, oh, well, this is hate. I'm doing this because I hate everybody, or whatever that a lot of times the people on the outside in the world look at it and see. From your perspective, when you're involved in this stuff, what you are doing is absolutely righteous. It's absolutely right. And you, in your mind at the time, and it isn't until you start breaking those things down, or like in my story, meeting different people that helped me to see it. You have to believe you're seeing it yourself. No one's going to make you see it. If someone comes and shakes you and says you're wrong, just like the whole you know, punch a Nazi thing or that sort of thing, that kind of thing actually does the opposite. When you are pressured like that from the outside in that manner, usually for most people, I mean, it's not, everyone's different, but for the majority of people, you're going to get a pushback. You're going to actually radicalize that person worse than getting them out. So I think the psychological aspects and the driving factors are incredibly important to study and continue to study and look at these type of things. So thank you so much for that, Rod.
So Aria, also, yeah, and Rod, some people are saying maybe you should speak for us one day about your experiences, but we'll leave that for another day. Thank you for agreeing. Aria had a question for you, Jeff, about childhood. Jesse referenced his childhood, and feel free to decline to answer if you don't want to. But Aria, do you want to ask your question? Is he still here? Well, maybe he's signed out. Oh, yes, you're here.
I'm here. Very interesting and insightful presentation, Jeff. Really appreciate it. You mentioned that you joined the movement because you were fascinated with the family history and the glory of maybe, you know, Nazism of the 30s and the 40s. But my question was, why did you leave home? What prompted you to leave home as a relatively young boy?
Well, for me, that's a good question. But I had a good home life. Like my parents were working class, middle class, and you know, the best way I can explain that is I was starting to lose interest in school, where I felt like it was just the same thing being repeated over and over again. I was getting good grades, and I didn't, my parents had structure and rules and different things like that. And I just got into this rebellious phase at that time. And I don't really think that it really had a lot to do with the movement, because I hadn't joined the movement at that point. I think it was just me. I mean, the best way I can look at it is I don't blame my parents. It was my own fault. I had things set up where I was supposed to go to, I forget what the program's called, but it's like a mentorship program where you can go your senior year of high school and you can go on to college, and it's all paid for because I had the decent grades enough to do that. So that was all set up. And then I decided, school's boring. I don't want to go. And I started, you know, taking off in my car and going for hikes in the woods and driving around and just not really getting into trouble per se, but skipping school. And then after so many days of missed school, they start knocking your grades down. So I had A's and B's, and they were all going down to D's and F's. And then eventually I got kicked out of school. I wasn't listening to my parents, so I went and moved in with a girlfriend's brother. And you know, that's why I was out at a young age.
I think sometimes we find this with smart kids, you know, that you're, you know, bored in school and you need something more, but, you know, there may be a whole lot of other things going on. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Arya. Did you want to say something?
No, I think that's very interesting. The rebellious phase, you know, strikes a chord that you really wanted to be independent. You didn't want the constraints that the school system was imposing on you, and you felt sufficiently empowered and agentic to strike on your own. So it was not that you suffered any particular humiliation or belittling as a child, but rather you felt the rebelliousness. You wanted to get out of the system and do something different.
Yeah, yep, that's true.
So we have so many questions, Jeff. One is from Lawrence Bergman, and a little bit aggressive, but asking, is it enough to just say sorry, or do you need to make reparations? And it sounds to me like you believe you should make reparations, but maybe you want to speak about that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the work I do now and speaking out like this is part of my way to give back, is to try to do something positive. Most people that are coming out, and we work with, you know, as Jesse mentioned too, working with a lot of people that are coming out, and the vast majority of those people just want to quietly go back to their lives, you know, go back to, you know, what I would call civilian life after being out of the movement. And for me, I felt driven or compelled to do something positive, to do something public, just to speak out about this. Because the easy way out, you know, when I left the movement 2 years ago, when I left, I said, you know, I'm retiring, and I left the organization. I already knew I was going to speak out, but I wasn't ready to do it immediately. So I basically said that I was retiring from the movement. The chief of staff, which would have been the second in command of the NSM, ended up taking over the organization at that point. And but yes, I mean, I feel completely driven to repair some of the damage that I've done in the past, and that's what drives me to do the work that I do now. So, but I think that's different with everyone. I would like to say, you know, that everyone should get out and do this kind of stuff, but it's not something that a lot of people can do. It's very difficult. When I met with the Simon Wiesenthal Center after I first started speaking out, and when they came out, I said, I'm ready. I want to speak out. I want to start doing stuff publicly. And my friend Rick Eaton there, he says, well, you know, do you think that's something you want to really do? Are you sure you're ready to do that? And I said, Rick, I've been speaking my entire life. I'm a public speaker. That's what I do. It's easy. And Rick says, he goes, I don't think it's going to be as easy as you think, Jeff, doing this. It's a lot different. And at the time I thought, nah, it's going to be easy, but oh man, Rick was 100% right. In the movement, you're talking politics. You never are talking about yourself, especially as the leader. It's about the mission and all that. And when you're out and doing this type of thing, talking about yourself, your vulnerabilities, your shame, your embarrassment, all those things that you carry from wondering, like, why did I do these things for so many years? And explaining that to people, it makes you feel like, I mean, it's tough stuff to process. So it's hard for people to speak out. And then there's, for a lot of people, there's the fear of speaking out and repercussions from the old organizations, from the movement, doubts from different sections of society that don't want to hear from people that have left the movement. There's all kinds of different nuances to this sort of thing. But for me, this is my way of doing something positive and changing the mission. As Daryl said too, it's like we're still on a mission, but this time it's for everybody, and it's correct.
Thank you. Jesse, maybe you can speak a little bit about this. It sounds like shame is a real big part of this, and shame definitely a part of coming out. And we know that shame is a social emotion, that when we're shamed, we're separated from everyone else. I mean, parents even use it as a parenting technique, throw you on the step for a timeout, you're shamed, you're out. And when Jeff left, he's got to go through all the shame, and you also. And you do have to reconnect with others. So I wonder if you'd like to comment a bit on that and how strong an emotion that is.
Yes, it's directly related to social connectedness, and that is the key for healing. Because what happened with me is I walked around and I said, much like Jeff is saying now, when I went public at George Washington University's program on extremism, I said that this is my way of making amends. Right? But I still inside knew that I was suffering from toxic shame. I had not yet done the therapeutic work, the deep dive that allowed me to transition toxic shame into guilt. And guilt is different than shame in the sense that you can feel guilty and take accountability for what you've done, but that you can reorient that direction in a powerful way where the healing has been achieved. And that's where the work on de-radicalization truly comes to fruition, when you understand, because a lot of times it's like leaving an addiction. Like for the first year, when you're going to AA meetings and NA meetings, they tell you just stay clean and sober. It's the only thing that you should do. You're not supposed to make sense of your experiences. You won't understand them until you start to get distant more and more from the group. And shame is associated with addiction, the things that we do in addiction. We lie, we cheat, we steal, we do all kinds of negative things. It's not us, but we still carry the burden of those behaviors. Once toxic shame can be transitioned in a way where it's better understood as guilt, then guilt can be a motivating factor and it can be reoriented. And so the only reason I'm able to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and still stay balanced and still stay comfortable and still stay dedicated to this cause is because finally that burden, that trauma, the re-traumatization that once occurred while even talking about my case that I couldn't even recognize, right, has come to a point where I am actually safe in sitting in that space. And the only way that would be and has been able to be possible is by understanding that I needed to reconnect socially. I needed to have a connectedness with my society, and I needed to build a new support group, and I needed to have people that actually supported me and loved me, because a lot of people in the field that we work in are truth be told, really at the end of the day, once you start to engage with professionals or former extremists or the other people that surround this limited space, you have to get above and beyond that as well, because a lot of people are seeking self, and you can really get used as a former, and you can really get abused as a person who used to be an extremist, because there's a lot of misunderstandings that plague the assumptions of our field. And so you have to really stay optimistic, and you have to be very careful who you choose to associate with, who you choose to share yourself with, and only in understanding how the distinction between toxic shame and guilt, and directing shame in a way that is healthy and that can be healing and that takes time, and not being hard on yourself yourself, not punishing yourself every day when you wake up. That's the only thing that will prevent not going back into extremism. Like Jeff left, he announced his departure from the movement. He couldn't go back and be trusted even if he wanted to. People would consider it a betrayal, but the other areas of life that are started to unfold in front of you that become burdensome, the poverty, the early stages of having to find new ways to make income and new ways to find stability, the search for stability that needs to precede that addressing of toxic shame, all those things become very real. And that's why when we think about providing countering violent extremism programming, we have to think about how to take those things like toxic shame, better understand them, and understand that it's not about working on the symptoms of the root disease, which is addiction. It's about healing that lack of social connection and that identity fusion that was merged with this hateful group. But it wasn't the group that was hateful. It was self-hatred. It was internal turmoil, it was internal frustration. And the same way that that internal frustration and hatred found a home in the group and then allowed the identity to numb itself by merging with the group is the same way that we can deconstruct those processes by replacing them with new social bonds and new social connectedness that can start to impart a better awareness of the distinctions between toxic shame and guilt and how they manifest themselves so that people can notice the distinctions and the characteristics, the symptoms of differentiations between the two of them. I think shame is a very, and the literature on shame is fascinating in psychology and in social psychology as well. And we know a lot about it. These are the ways that I think that the field needs to progress going forward, is to merge much more of what's going on right now in the space of mental health. Not to say that mental health and the nexus between mental health and extremism is a direct one, but I do think that we need to start to take a much more transdisciplinary approach and stop trying to rebuild the wheel, understanding extremists as some aberrant phenomenon that's different than other ills and afflictions that are largely consequences of social and individual traumas. And one can have a good upbringing and still be traumatized as a result of the parenting models and the types of connections that they had first with their family and how those connections with their family manifested with regard to connections with their society. And we're learning so much about this in the realm of addiction, mental health treatment, sex offender treatment, criminal recidivism reduction, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot there that we can chew on rather than trying to look at countering violent extremism or radicalization and terrorism studies as something that's new, starting from scratch, coming out of our a war on terror era that was highly influenced by security concerns, not necessarily driven by human ones.
Thank you, Jesse. And we've got so many questions, we're not going to get through them all, but there's one by a mother of someone that joined the Army, and her son suicided. And she's asking about the cultism. I don't know if she means in the military, or I know certainly that groups like yours, Jeff, and other groups, I don't know if your group did this, targeted military and military vets. Can you speak about that at all? And Ryan's here. Ryan is a vet and went through something similar. If you could speak about that a bit. And I'm so sorry that this mother is here with that sad story. God bless you.
Yes, thank you so much for the question. As far as the military goes, the NSM certainly and definitely targeted people in the military, and we encouraged people to go into the military for the training. And back in the, I actually had gotten a report that had been from the FBI that was studying the NSM or infiltrating the NSM, and back in it was the early 2000s or late 90s, and they had said in the report that about 10 to 20% or something were former military. And you know, in the report they were saying, well, this person in this state, you know, and of course a lot of stuff was blacked out. But by the time I left the organization, I mean, we shifted that, because that was a low number. It was accurate at the time, which was quite interesting. But by the time that I left the organization, I would say it was more close to about 50% of the membership. About half of the membership either had come out of the military, you know, previous experience. A lot of them had combat experience, and that shift in the NSM, I'd say, started taking place at about 2008 to about the time I left, where we had a lot of retention and a lot of people coming from the military because of the structure of the organization and the way it was set up. it appealed to a lot of people in the military. And there was a word that I missed in the question from the mother. Exactly what was it about the
about being a cult? And I don't know if she means the military being a cult or your type of groups. I mean, you've referred to it as a bit of a cult. And were you actively seeking these military members?
Absolutely, because we saw the goal of the NSM in so many different ways. Was we saw the United States, in our opinion at the time, and I'm putting myself back there at that time, but we thought the United States would break up, whether it was through a civil war of some sort or through race war. So we encouraged people to get that training, to go into the military in a lot of cases, and to have that training. And we sought that. In fact, on our applications, we wanted to know what level of military experience they had. A lot of times people would send in their DD-214s to show us their, experience, because I personally, when I was looking for leaders in different areas, states, local cities, things like that, if they had military experience on their application, that was like a big thumbs up to me at the time when I was looking for people, because I was like, well, this person already has discipline, this person already has some training, so it was a big plus for us at the time, looking for people that had that type of training. So it's definitely a problem. I know it's something the military is struggling with to this day, is that there's a lot of people that are in there. And we told everybody specifically, do not recruit while you're in there, because they will find you out and they will potentially throw you out. And we had guys that they weren't dishonorably discharged, but there's another term, and it's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't think of it. Ryan might know what it is, but they would basically tell the people to leave if they were recruiting in there. And I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done there, but certainly there is some parallels.
Thank you, Jeff. There's also a question from Lisa McDonald about prevention, that a lot of this that we've been talking about is intervention, but how do we prevent this altogether? I don't know if you want to address that, Jeff, or Daryl. You're certainly working on this a lot. You haven't spoken again yet. Well, go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. I was waiting for Daryl. As far as prevention, a lot of it has to do with education. Now, in the school system, and I think this is incredibly important, in the school system, they teach about the Holocaust and things like that, and I think they do a good job on that, but I don't think that's enough, because there's a disconnect. They're not people. I'm speaking from my own personal experience and a lot of the people that we've worked with. They don't connect with that, because it was in the past, it was in a different country. It doesn't resonate enough. I think actually real experience, personal experience, hearing stories like what Daryl and Dia had shared with me, hearing those personal experience, having someone come into the classroom, having I know when I was in school, they had a international day or something like that. And it was one day out of the year where you would experience different cultures. They'd bring in different foods and things like that. I think that's great, but it's one day out of the year. I think if you had a program where you're learning about the different cultures and things like that, we had all these suspicions or conspiracy theories that we believed about Jewish people, which could have been easily disproven if you would have actually known some Jewish people. And so things like this, where you're learning about different religions, different cultures. One week you could be learning about Hinduism. The next week it could be Buddhism. One week you could learn about culture in Kenya. The next week it'd be culture in Germany. They should be doing stuff like this in school, so there's not these biases, and there's these false ideas of how people are and what they believe in. So if that starts, I don't see it as, in the movement, I would see that as, oh, these are indoctrination courses. But no, make it something interesting and study everyone and all the different religions and cultures and things like that. Don't leave anybody out, because that's going to cause problems right off the bat. So I think there's definitely something with the Department of Education that could be done to fix these things and start at a very young age, make it interesting, make it fun, and be inclusive, period.
I might want to throw in there, and I had my thing muted there. Jeff is absolutely right about that. It starts in the schools with a young age, and unfortunately, there's a lot of taboo still on this topic. Parents don't want their kids talking about that kind of stuff, and teachers aren't quite sure how to handle it, that kind of thing. But I'll tell you, I've spoken all over this country, and one of the best states that has these kinds of programs is New Jersey. And often every year I'll speak at middle schools in New Jersey. They bring in Rwandan genocide survivors, Holocaust survivors, 9/11 people, some of the survivors of Columbine, and this, that, and the other. And it goes on for, in these different counties at these middle schools. And these kids are very interested and very well aware of this stuff. And I'll tell you, I would not be surprised if these are not our future leaders, because they have such a broad grasp and knowledge of this kind of thing. And this is where, where we start preventing it. When I was in junior high school, now I guess it's called middle school or whatever. When I was in junior high school, sex education was being introduced. And my goodness, people were having a fit. Parents were going crazy about it. And, so if you wanted to have your kid take sex ed, you had to send a note to the school. And it was part of the PE class, and you took it separately. Otherwise, the teachers were not allowed to teach it. And then now, of course, now today, it's part of the regular curriculum. But, guess what? If parents don't want to teach that stuff at home, and they don't want teachers teaching it, the kid is still going to learn it. And where's he going to learn it? Out on the street. So don't be surprised if your kid comes home pregnant or something, or with some venereal disease. So now that sex ed is part of the regular curriculum in school, kids are more informed about family planning, contraception, STDs, etc. And information is power. So we need to lift the taboo of talking about this stuff, like Jeff was mentioning, all these things on a regular basis, not just International Day, one day a year. That does not get it. That's just, a token to appease somebody. It has to be part of the regular curriculum. And that way kids learn on a regular basis, and they are more informed. And as they grow older and they become exposed to this kind of stuff out in society, they know better than to get involved in it. They know how to circumvent it and how to navigate it. Education prepares us for a lot of things academically, but oftentimes they don't prepare us for real life. Like, for example, I was a good kid in school. I know plenty of women who were girls who were good kids in school, and now they're women and they're out here. But we were not prepared in school. I was told to work as hard as I could, get good grades, et cetera, et cetera. But I was not told that when I graduate, I was going to have a hard time finding a job because of the color of my skin. That kind of boom hit me in the face. Even after I graduated college, it was still the same. You're not told as a woman that even though you may be the class valedictorian and got better grades than every guy in the school, that when you graduate and you go out there to get a job, whether it's high school or college, that you're still going to be paid 79 cents on a man's dollar. People, we're not preparing our kids for these things that actually happen outside the school wall. Because when we're on the campus, we're pretty much being treated like everybody else, as equals. But when we leave the sanctity of our high school or our college and we're in the real world, we have to deal with real world things, like women being harassed sexually on the job, or being paid less than men for the same amount of work, or being judged by the color of your skin, or whether you wear a burqa or whatever else. These are things that the academics do not tell us, and that's a problem.
I just want to cut in really quick, if possible, Anne.
Go for it.
Yeah, just
2 minutes left. We've got 2 minutes left.
It'll be 60 seconds just for people that are interested in prevention. The work that Kurt Braddock is doing in a paper that he published in the Journal of Terrorism and Political Violence on inoculation theory and its application to getting at the youth, I think gives us very serious indications of what we might be able to achieve in that realm educationally. And he's the recipient of a Department of Homeland Security grant that's going to be producing interesting work. He works with Dr. Cynthia Miller-Idris at American University. Peril is the name of the institution for people that want to check out some of the empirical data on that. But I think it's fundamentally important to stress education, but I think that if we look at what we're learning about educational programs like DARE, which is like the Just Say No campaign, or like child sex education, what we're learning in the data is that that work has to be directly related to community service. So we're learning more and more about social connectivity and social connectedness as a result of educational programming. So education is important, but it's also important to follow up education with opportunities to engage in multicultural ways, like religious programming, interfaith programming. In states like Michigan, they have to visit churches, mosques, synagogues, and a Hindu temple before they can graduate from high school now. Those are very important initiatives because you have to link the education to an opportunity to engage, and that's where you can mobilize networks that can rival in size and scope the extremist networks that people are going to be confronted with as they go through life. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
That's great. We are at our time, so I want to thank you, Daryl and Jesse and Jeff. And Jeff, since you were our main speaker, if you want a last word, go for it.
Thank you again to Ann and Jesse and everyone for having me here today, and it's been a great honor. And if you'd like to see the work that we're doing at Beyond Barriers, it's beyondbarriersusa.org or jeffscoop.com. Thanks again, a great honor, and all for the wonderful questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everything, but thanks again to everyone.
Okay, we'll make sure that gets in the chat, your information. Sorry if we didn't put that already. And thank you to all of you. Thank you, Daryl, for confronting Jeff and being someone that humanized Black people for him. Thank you, Jeff, for changing. And thank you, Jesse. And there was a comment on how smart all of you are. And it's definitely true. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the participants. I'm sorry we didn't get to every single question, but we did get to many of them. Thank you for taking part.